Kia ora, welcome to Parliament TV. Over the next hour we present items from the TVNZ collection, from archives held by Ngā Taonga Sound and Vision, to remember the politics from our past.
Just weeks out from the 1990 general election, the Labour government replaced its leader Geoffrey Palmer with its new leader and Prime Minister Mike Moore. The late change wasn't able to help Labour win another term in office.
Jim Bolger led the National Party to a landslide victory, winning 67 seats to Labour's 28, with New Labour winning 1 seat. This frontline programme was broadcast the following night, on 28 October 1990. For rights reasons, some elements of this programme have been removed.
October the 27th, 1990. It'll go down in history as the day of reckoning in the year of the long knives. Just 54 days after Mike Moore's plotters put him in the Prime Minister's office, the plot turned sour when the voters turned on Labour with a vengeance. And gone were the Labour MPs from such unlikely places as West Coast and Western Hutt, and gone too were those cabinet plotters, Gough, Jeffries and probably Nielsen too. Hello and welcome to Frontline. Tonight we talk live with Prime Minister-elect Jim Bolger and later with defeated Labour leader Mike Moore. But first a look back on an explosive day in New Zealand politics, the day New Zealand elected to Parliament 2 ex-All Blacks, 2 ex-Cops and the first Catholic Prime Minister since Michael Joseph Savage. Linda Clark in Te Kuiti and Terence Taylor in Christchurch report on Election Day.
Jim Bolger, king for the day, which isn't bad for a farmer who's spent the last 6 weeks convincing us all he's presidential.
Get people in jobs. No circus.
We believe, in fact, that New Zealanders want straight government, they want honesty, and they want fairness.
And the voters also wanted more than platitudes, more than the tired old electoral tune.
Well, they must have come down here and play bowls, mightn't they, because they're no good at running the country.
What about the campaign, though? You must have enjoyed it.
Not really. I think it's been more Disneyland than anything.
Just a bore. I'm glad it's over today.
Why?
Well, you get a bit sick of it, don't you?
I was pleased this morning to read the Herald and there was no political bullshit in it for a change.
But the real change was going on in polling booths.
Do you want me to open it? Go on.
In Te Kuiti, Jim Bolger positively purred. He had sweet victory in mind and nothing else. But there were other trophies just as precious at stake in the King country yesterday. Believe it or not, but in Te Kuiti and in Christchurch too, the election wasn't the only knees up in town. Came to his own party early, but Jim Bolger held back, knowing full well the nation would watch him.
Well, Jim is going to be in about 2 or 3 minutes.
I see. What, going to go in and make that call, or spreading with the strategy are we going for?
It looks like one, straight over there. Straight over there.
Okay.
It looks like it, but don't. We've got a final conclusion.
Mike, good evening.
Just ringing to congratulate you and Joan. You've got the country, you've had a tremendous result from your point of view. I wish you well.
James must be doing it.
All the very best.
We love you. We love you. Oh, disappointing. We'll come again, though.
And as the enormity of their victory began to sink in, a civilised party through what else? A civilised party.
What's Jim Bolger going to be like as Prime Minister?
I think he'll be good. Take a little time to settle down, but after that he'll
See what
really
the country needs?
Yes.
Oh, I think he'll just take things easy. You know? Might be a bit hard on some of these unemployed people.
It's going to make a huge difference, is it, to the direction of the country?
Well, it'll take time, won't it? Take a long time, I would think.
But they'll bring the country round.
We hope they'll bring the country around. We hope we'll have a step in a good direction this time.
Jim Bolger, welcome to Frontline and congratulations.
Thank you.
We want to give you the chance tonight, before you open the books, to say to us all bets are off. That when you see those books, the economy might be in such a condition that you want to say, no extra police, no taking off the surtax, things are too bad. Would you like to do that tonight?
Of course not. Wouldn't that be totally ridiculous? I was elected on a massive landslide victory yesterday, myself and my party, on a series of commitments, and you invite me on the live on a television program tonight to say, look, tear up the manifesto, tear up the commitments, shred the speeches I've been given, and you, Mr. Stevens, think I'm going to do that. Well, I have to tell you, you really don't know Jim Bolger, do you?
Well, one of the things I think that this election has been about, in a way, is the good faith that people want from politicians. And
well, you wanted to destroy it then. You wanted me to walk away from it all without even seeing the books. That I find incredible.
Are you confident that the things that you've promised you're going to be able to pay for?
We're committed to put in place the policies that we campaigned on, and we said it would take us the full 3 years to bring them all into fruition, into practice and in place, and that's certainly our intention. I equally said many, many times on the campaign trail that we were anticipating that the economy would look worse when we were given the full details. You recall that little fracas that I had with the outgoing Prime Minister, Mr. Moore, on releasing documents, and finally we got some sketchy notes, really, a page and a half or thereabouts. So that foreshadows that the information, when it comes, is not going to be very pleasing. It's going to be quite, I imagine, difficult. But we still have 3 years to put our policies in place. That's the program we set ourselves, and that's certainly what we intend to achieve.
I'm suggesting to you, in fact, that $700 million worth of promises might be impossible to pay for once you've seen the real situation.
Well, let's see the real situation and put that $700 million also in the context of a government expenditure budget of 31 point some billion dollars. I mean, the state has a huge budget, and there are, I think it's $6 or $7 billion outside even the core areas of health, welfare, police, debt servicing, and all of those, education, all those big ones which tend to be more difficult in the sense they're driven by people demands. In other words, if unemployment rises, you get an automatic increase in government spending. But there's still some billions of dollars outside that area. And I was quoting in one of my recent campaign speeches towards the end the extraordinary increase in the administration of some government departments. We'll certainly want to look at that. I mean, our old friends in Inland Revenue look like they've just about got as many tax collectors in there now. What it costs them to run the place, there are taxpayers. So that side of government we will certainly have to look at very, very closely.
Can you find sufficient cuts, though, to pay for the things that you promised and to maintain programs that are already existing? That's the question. Without raising taxes, as you've committed yourself not to doing it, without borrowing.
Everybody focuses just on cutting, which is important. We have to get, be prudent and get good value for the dollars we spend on behalf of the taxpayer.
Economists are saying that growth is a long way away.
Well, you can get terribly pessimistic, and I wouldn't want to do that after I've just won a tremendous victory and then say, my gosh, it's all too hard.
Well,
I'm not going to do that.
How do you justify your optimism then?
Well, we must turn the economy around and get some growth back into the economy, and once you achieve that, and depending on how quickly you can get back to realistic targets, and we've set ourselves a target of 3%, once you get back to that, you start to immediately change the whole equation of government expenditure.
When do you expect to get back to growth?
You take people off the dole, where they're dependent on the taxpayer, and you put them back into work, or they go back into work and they become taxpayers. Now, that changes the whole chemistry of the government expenditure program. How quick can we get there? Well, it's probably impossible in this program to give you a precise answer. We'll know a little bit better informed later this week on that matter. But make some of the changes that we see as essential to get a high level of productivity and high level of utilisation of plant. There's a lot of talk about productivity, but you must also look at the utilisation of the capital equipment that we have in plants. And if you don't get into better utilisation, of course, we're not going to match the countries that do. See, New Zealand must face this. We have been going along the way of the last few years, and it frankly hasn't worked. Here we are, we're sitting on this program tonight. The old government's been thrown out on a landslide. There are 200,000 people and rapidly increasing unemployed. We have extraordinary debt. We have a deficit on government accounts which is foreshadowed to be very, very large. Now, common sense says, change it, do something different.
Mr Bolger, isn't the lesson of the election yesterday the fact that any party that pursues an inflation policy of 0 to 2% is destined for the political graveyard?
No, of course not. I mean, there's been much too much made of the 0 to 2% as if that was the only goal of either political parties, which of course it's not. What we have is a package of goals in front of us, all important, and as I've said many times, wouldn't it be great if we did emulate Japan and got down to around 2% inflation and 7% interest rates? Then we really would get that growth we're talking about just before the break. But the focus must be on balancing the policies, but lower interest rates are important, growth is important, getting those jobs are important. All of those things are important. Getting the government deficit under control, and that's why I'm going to set up a ministerial task force when I announce my cabinet to get on with that job.
But it's a way of saying, in fact, that if say, the Ruth Richardson faction were to get control of caucus, if the Ruth Richardson is to become the finance minister, if the policies that have been articulated are to be pursued, that your government could well end up being as unpopular as the Labour government you turfed out yesterday for exactly that reason, that 0 to 2% is seen to be destructive of the economy.
No, that's not the reason they got turfed out yesterday. I think that's a very, very peripheral reason. One of the substantive reasons is, of course, that they were dishonest with the voters. They did things they solemnly said they wouldn't do. They sold assets that they said they wouldn't do. They really walked all the way across their policy. They tore it up. They ignored their own members. I mean, the list is endless. And that's the substantive reason I found going around. I had nobody asking me on the campaign about 0 to 2 except for journalists. The public, I have to assure you, are not all hung up on it.
When you said around 2%, does that mean that you might be thinking about raising the limits?
No.
If Ruth is determined, as she obviously is in the way you are, is she a finance minister that you feel confident in dealing with as a strong woman?
You're going to have to wait till I announce the portfolios to talk about individual ministers. But Ruth has done a very good job as finance spokesman over the last the years she's had the job. And she'll do well, but ministerial allocations have yet to be made.
What are you going to do with the growth agreement?
Well, there's not much to do with in that sense. In the sense it's not an agreement, there's no signed document. There's an understanding that the trade union, CTU, will advise its affiliates to go for a low wage, except there's some additional permission of increases on
productivity.
Well, measurable productivity. And that's always more difficult than people think. And if that works, then the Reserve Bank will adopt a accommodating stance. In other words, won't be tightening up the money supply and pushing up interest rates. That's fine. But there's no documentation. I said last night that I would certainly want the unions to accept that there has to be a moderate wage round. And I imagine I'll be commenting further on that when we see the real face of the New Zealand economy in the next few days.
Can I suggest to you your reaction to the growth agreement is typical in a way of the way Jim Bolger does his politics? There was an initial reserve, if not opposition, to the idea. I presume when you saw the first agreement come in at 2% with 1% for productivity, you saw that it might work, and that for Jim Bolger is something perhaps he's going to suddenly then go for, something that'll work, something that's pragmatic. Is that a fair assessment?
No, the build-up is not fair, Ross, but the end comment you make is right.
You're a pragmatist.
I'd use common sense as a better term than pragmatist.
Principle?
Pragmatist suggests that you will just grab at anything that looks all right for today. I would describe my opponent, Mr Moore, as a pragmatist. I think grab anything. I have a much more consistent framework, but within that framework, I certainly want common sense policies. And I certainly intend to work with people to achieve those common sense policies. As I say, pragmatism seems to suggest in the minds of most that there is no consistent framework. There has to be a consistent framework.
You've got a large caucus. You've got wets and dries, to use the Labor terminology in there. In fact, you've got a peculiar analogy in a way of the way the Labor caucus was. How are you going to control those in the caucus who oppose your 0 to 2 objectives and other of the objectives that you've articulated in the manifesto?
Caucus is an interesting gathering of people, and there are always people with differing views or differing emphasis in caucus. There's nothing new in that. I've sat in caucus now for 18 years, the last 4.5 as its leader. And you have to work with people to reach the consensus and the common position. And then you expect people to stay with it. What annoys caucus, much more sometimes than annoys the leader, are those members who, having agreed to a position in caucus, then dash out and say to a particular special interest group, well, look, caucus says this, but I disagree. I reckon that's all a bit irrational. Now, what we must do in our caucus is learn from the major mistakes that happened in the Labor caucus, where they refused to work as a team, and inevitably they became more and more fractured and split. The divisions became wider, and you had cabinet ministers sacked, and the scenario we're very familiar with. I would hope that my caucus, very large, the largest in New Zealand's history, will understand and learn from the mistakes of the Labor caucus.
How are you going to get people then, like Michael Laws, for example, on board, who's been very public and very specific about his opposition to what you're saying is a key, if not the integral part of your economic policy?
Well, I'm not sure what Michael was talking about once when he said he was going to go across the Florida House to vote against something. 0 to 2. I'm not sure what he was going to vote on, frankly. It seemed to me that he wasn't quite up with the structure in that sense, so he's quite familiar with it, having worked in Parliament. But can I just observe that within the National Party you are entitled to vote against your party, and there have been many, many instances where that has happened, where a person feels a particular issue is of such importance to him or his constituency or her constituency that they do vote against the party line. Now, I imagine that will happen from time to time.
What's your style of leadership? Is it, as David Longy once observed, as Mike Moore himself observed, chairman of the board, or are you a principal politician who's going to lead from the front and try and mould a consensus rather than work to a consensus?
You've got to both lead and mould. There's no use leading. There's no use to general being way out in front if you've not got the troops along with you. So you've got to give the lead, you've got to show the correct direction as you can see it, or your senior colleagues are suggesting, perhaps after some discussion in Cabinet or whatever. But then you've got to mould in the people who have doubts, who have other propositions that they want to put forward. I mean, a caucus of any number, but certainly of the size that I will have differing viewpoints. You don't pick clones to represent an electorate. You, in fact, have a House of Representatives. And the caucuses of the two major parties do represent a fairly wide spectrum of views, one from the centre to the left and the other from the centre to the right, in general terms.
How important is your Catholic faith to you?
It's important to me. I am a Catholic. I have been practising my faith ever since I was a little fella. Catholic is the word for Catholics. They cover a broad range of the spectrum. Of course they are. What sort of Catholic are you? Well, you better ask others. I go to church and pray and do my best. I'm not certainly going to put any mantle on myself on that. There's been a suggestion today from the Christian Heritage Party, who decided not to stand candidates against selected national candidates because they thought they were okay on moralist issues, that this government might be much more conservative on moralist issues than previous governments. Is that a fair assessment in your view? No, I haven't tried to, well, I can't make the assessment. I haven't tried to assess the moral stance of the members of caucus. And of course, on all substantive moral issues, there are a free vote of caucus. There is no party position at all. And I will vote according to as I assess it, and every other member has an equal responsibility and opportunity to vote on moral issues as they see them. One last thing. We've had lots of mail over the last month or so on this program, as we've been doing these question time programs, about politicians and perks, superannuation and salaries. Can you give us some kind of undertaking that perks and salaries and superannuation deals are going to be within the range that ordinary people can expect to get, the sort of 2% range, if they're to be increased at all? Well, I'm sure they will be within the ordinary range, but can I just make the observation on this program that members of Parliament don't make their own recommendations. They are recommended by a body that's set up to determine what is the appropriate salary for a Member of Parliament. We don't get the members to set their own salaries, just as you don't set yours. Somebody determines what you're worth as a presenter on this program. Conversely, someone determines what a member of parliament is worth relative to other people who work in a broadly comparable occupation. Now, there's no absolute comparison, but that's what they try to do. I have to say, and I say it in advance, I have not the slightest doubt, no matter what increase is recommended for members of parliament, either this year, next year, or in 10 years' time, many outside will say too much. They always have, they always will.
Mr. Bolger, thank you very much. I expect we'll see you back in the Frontline studio.
I hope so.
He likes to think of himself, and indeed he probably earned the title over the past 54 days as the battler. Mike Moore. He was chosen to help Labour do better than the disaster that the polls promised if Palmer had remained as Prime Minister. In the end, the plan failed as National won 67 seats to Labour's 29. Earlier today, as he visited the St Bede's College Fair in Christchurch, I talked to Mike Moore about his loss. Can I put it to you that 67 for National, 29 for Labour, 1 for the new Labour Party means that in effect the change that you wrought in deposing Geoffrey Palmer, in doing that, essentially that you blew it. You blew the most basic objective, which was to secure the position of the Labour Party in the Parliament.
Well, let's think about that historically. I'll accept the responsibility for what happened. I don't want to blame anyone. I don't want to go back to the programs and the polls and the disillusionment. I just want to go forward. I could be mean-spirited, I will not be.
You still think the people are right even when they're wrong?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's a good thing to support a country and a promise by the National Party on superannuation, on health systems, on employment, to our green policies, our environmental policies, our nuclear policies. And a lot of people voted for that and supported that. And if Mr Bolger can get the surcharge off by Christmas, if he can lower interest rates and lower the dollar and lower inflation and spend more on social services and education as he promised, he'll get the continued support of the country. And I think he ought to get a fair go. His government, he has a manifesto, he ought to be able to implement that and he ought to get a fair go.
Do you think you should have listened more to the party?
One thing I really dislike is people talking about the Labour Party and the government. We are supposed to be the same thing, and we ought to be the same thing. And I think we've laid the foundations now for making it the same thing. I really get annoyed when I hear people talking about the Parliamentary Labour Party and the Labour Party, the same thing. You don't have 2 membership tickets.
But if the government had listened to the party on things like telecom, for example, which I presume are among the things that the people have rejected you on, that may not have happened.
Well,
I think the result may have
there are other issues driving decisions. Don't forget, we're a government with debt. We needed to retire, but I don't want to get into that, if you don't mind. I'm thinking of the future, and I will not have a public post-mortem. I will want to talk to colleagues. There is a process we have to go through, and Labour has to listen up. We have to spend time listening. We cannot, and we were surrounded by paper, by officials and by the dynamics of crises all the time. Now's our chance to listen up, and we've grouped up a bit.
What's your own future as leader?
I'll continue to work for the Labour Party. I don't know why you ask it.
Do you think there is a capacity in the Labour Party to regain the Parliament in the next election, given the volatility in the election?
Crazy question. Of course there is. I've been in the party 20 years, and every year they write about the party's death and how the next conference is going to slice us open, and we still tend to be there. And we are the progressive force in New Zealand. We are the reformers. We're so reformist we reform our own reforms 50 years ago. That is the nature of the Labour Party and the Labour movement. And if you have a look at the votes and how they went, see a lot of people, you know, the green thing is a mood. It's a good mood, by the way. It's a joyous mood. It's a mood that a country can have when it has governments that have progressive policies. We help create that mood. That's a good mood. It's a nice thing, isn't it? It doesn't quite get the analysis on deficits that we would have, but it's a good mood. And those people, good Kiwis, and I think we'll welcome them back. But there's a new government. It has an awesome mandate and an awesome manifesto. I think you can see a collision there.
In what way?
Well, as Jim Bolger knows, as Ruth Richardson knows, because of the papers they've had, because we have a far more open government system now. They know the state of the economy. Ruth Richardson sent the memos, they know. And that's where the collision will be.
I want to quote at you something that you quoted in your book. It's from Disraeli, who said, "A nation is made by its institutions. Destroy those and you destroy the nation itself." Can I suggest that the perception was that that's in effect what your Labour government did?
Oh, perhaps, but you have a certain personal point of view, and that's fine. You can say that. I don't think we did destroy the great institutions of this country. In education, no. Look what we did.
But look at morale, look at spirit, look at confidence.
Let me answer your questions. Great institutions, what great institutions did we destroy? We reformed education in this country. There'll be no teacher, no parent and no child by early next year who'll want us to go back to that. Did we destroy our waterfront system by reorganising it? No. Oh, we did destroy the monopolies of some very privileged and protected businesses and enterprises that now are getting tax breaks promised to them. That is true. Great institutions of this country are there. This country is still very strong.
What about morale, spirit, the fact that people are, there is a sense of depression out there in the economy?
People have been depressed, and they're also depressed at ourselves. And there's nobody dancing the streets this morning, is there? There's no feeling out in this country, wow, now we're going to take off. We have a saviour. There is not that feeling because it's not true.
And now joining us live from Christchurch, the only NLP man about the house, Jim Anderton. Welcome, Jim, and congratulations.
Thank you, Ross.
You said yesterday that by 1993 the NLP will be the real opposition. How so, when in fact your showing elsewhere, other than Sydenham that is, was so dismal?
Well, it isn't dismal at all, actually. We had two priorities. One was to hold Sydenham as the bottom line for the party, and the second was to do well in heartland Labour seats. We've polled between 9 and 13% in the key seats that we targeted, and we've got a very strong base for the future. And I think you must realise that if both Labour and National keep their word to the electorate, there'll be proportional representation by 1993. And that'll give the NLP a very real chance of participating, if not being the government. We'll talk about proportional representation in just a moment, but your excellent showing aside, doesn't your result over the rest of the country in fact suggest that your return is that the policies that you are trying to return to, what you might call old Labour, are not as popular as you think they might be? No, I think the reverse actually, Ross. What it shows is that if those Labour colleagues of mine, former Labour colleagues, something like 12 to 16 of them, had stood up and been counted at the time that I did, then the Labour government would have been taken off the track that they continue to go on, right over the cliff they went over yesterday. And we could have stopped that, and the Labour members who are no longer members of Parliament would have got a similar kind of result in their electorates to what I got in Sydenham. Because the people of Sydenham, while they were voting for me, that's true in a personal sense, some of them, they were also voting for the kind of policies that Labour promised to deliver to this country and never did. You've changed your spots, as it were, over the question of proportional representation as you changed your party allegiances. What sort of proportional representation would you like to see? Well, I didn't actually change my spots, I changed my mind, given that the basis of parliamentary representation in the past has been that you put up manifestos to the people, they judge them, and then they vote for you, and then you implement your policies. But the Labour government broke the mould. It actually put up a policy and then ignored it. In fact, it went in exactly the opposite direction to what it promised. And so people have lost faith in that system. They want checks and balances. And intellectually, you can't disagree that the present system has failed them. So they've got to have another chance. And what the Royal Commission found after thousands of submissions was that the mixed member proportional representation system of having half the members of Parliament elected on a constituency basis like we do now and half represented on a proportional representation basis was the best system for New Zealand. I proposed that. Thank you very much for your time tonight. Thank you, Ross. I guess we'll see more of you on the programme. Yes, I think we might. When a political party gets beaten as badly as Labour was yesterday, how do they pick up the pieces? Terence Taylor talks to Labour Party President Ruth Dyson.
What do you think went wrong in the end? Do you think it was mainly presentation or policy?
No, I think it was policy. I think that the public in New Zealand a couple of years ago became so disillusioned with the Labour government and its response to the public that it decided to teach us a lesson. Now that's a very hard lesson for us to learn, but it's one that I think we learnt a while ago. I think we got the message from the public that the way we were proceeding with policies wasn't right. What we didn't do was say to the public, we know we've got it wrong, we know we're going to try and do things differently from now on.
Are you going to say that now?
Well, Mike Moore has already been saying that. Mike Moore's growth agreement was an amazing agreement. To get unions, employers and the Reserve Bank to agree to work together for the betterment of the country is unheard of in our history.
But are you going to go further than that now?
That was a major new policy initiative. We're not the government now. We're not in a position to make new policies to change the future of the country. We have to wait till we're the government again to do that.
Do you think you can reshape policy? Do you think there's going to be a move back to your traditional principles?
I think that that's something that the party has to work through, yes. I mean, obviously party members were concerned about the pace and change in a lot of policy areas, particularly in the economic policy. That's something that is well known, well accepted. It won't be news to anyone. We'll continue working those issues through.
And the caucus now more left-wing than before?
Well, I think we've still got a balanced caucus. We have some very talented new people coming in. I'm delighted to see Pete Hodgson, Paul Swain, Judith Tizard, Steve Mahari, Leanne Dalziel. I mean, we've got a very talented new lineup of people coming in. That's good for the future of the party. I hope to have had a few more people in, and I would have hoped to have retained people like Trevor Mallard and Richard Northey and Annette King and a number of others. That didn't happen, but I think the future looks good for us.
Do you think it won't be hard to rebuild morale?
Yes, it will be hard. It will be hard. People are grieving for the loss of their MPs and grieving for the loss of a government. That will be a difficult thing to go through. But if you look at the history of the party, we've been through an awful lot in the past, and we've always done it with some dignity and strength and unity, and hopefully we've learnt a few lessons from the last few years that will help us over the next few.
What about yourself? Do you feel a sense of failure as well as a sense of disappointment?
Well, I guess everybody does who was part of the election campaign. I did everything that I could for the election. People can say that I could have done it better. I'm sure that's always the case. I'm a human being. I did what I thought was right and I did the best I could. That's all I'm prepared to do because that's the most I'm prepared to do.
Labour Party President Ruth Dyson with Terence Taylor. Now we have Dr Michael Bassett in our Auckland studios, and here with me in Wellington, Television New Zealand journalist Richard Harman. I don't have to congratulate either of you, just say welcome. Dr Bassett, can we come to you first? What went wrong?
Well, I think by and large that the government lost its cohesion in the early part of 1988. It had been a very tightly knit government, a very purposeful one between 84 and the end of 87. But early in 1988, really the Prime Minister decided to go one way with some members of the caucus and the New Zealand executive of the party, while the Cabinet and a majority of the caucus felt that we should have stuck to what we were elected to do in 1987.
So you're saying it's not because of Rogernomics, it's because you paused on Rogernomics?
Oh, absolutely right, and I disagree fundamentally with the analysis that we've just heard. But position what I've just said alongside the stock market crash in October of 1987, when a lot of money disappeared overnight and when there was a feeling of unease economically in the country, the government suddenly looked as though it had lost its purpose and lost its cohesion, and it was all downhill, and you can measure it in the polls, statement by poll by statement by poll. And the history then over the next 18 months from the beginning of 1988 shows that confidence was running out both on the government and on the Prime Minister, and we know the rest of the story.
You seem to be attaching a good deal of the blame, as I read between what you're saying, to David Lange.
Well, he certainly has a lot to answer for, but in the end, perhaps some criticism falls back on the Cabinet, who, finding that they were determined to go one way and the Prime Minister wanted to go another, did not take the tough decisions early enough.
So you think people were ready for more tough decisions?
Well, they voted for them in 1987. They were amazed at the rapidity of the change, but they watched the way in which the Cabinet held together. They saw the cohesion of the policy and of the Cabinet and its determination to push, and they re-elected them. They wanted the reform to continue, but they certainly also wanted a slightly more human face to it all. What happened was that the cohesion disappeared completely, and it was all that seemed to be human face.
But the perception of cohesion may well have disappeared, but we are living with the consequences, nevertheless, of those policies now, and you got thrown out. I suggest because of those policies.
Oh, no, not at all, because the things which were actually foreshadowed at the end of 1987 and and during the election campaign itself were never able to come to fruition for the very good reason that the investment just did not take place because people lacked confidence in the government to see the job through. Their confidence in the government ran out, and consequently they sat on their checkbooks. And if you mirror, if you see what actually went on with savings levels and investment patterns around the country, it's all there for you to read it.
Richard Harman, what do you think went wrong for Labor?
I don't entirely agree with Dr Bassett. In fact, I think it's quite illuminating to compare Ruth Dyson and Dr Bassett on this program, and I think there you see what went wrong with Labor. You put whenever two or three members of the Labor Party are gathered together, you have an ideological debate, and that's what the party tore itself apart, turned in on itself, and the electorate thought it had become self-indulgent.
But wasn't the electorate more interested in the consequences of these policies on the pocket, on the standard of living, on confidence, and wasn't that the factor that finally did it?
If this was an election about economic issues, why then have we replaced David Cagle with Ruth Richardson? I can't see any substantial difference in the policies between the two of them. It seems, I'm absolutely convinced from what we've seen, reporting the election, from the polling we've seen, and if you look at the policies of the two parties, that Labor's been chucked out because people didn't like the way it behaved.
But Richard, wouldn't it be arguable that the public actually decided that if there wasn't much choice in the announced policies of National and Labor, National perhaps were perceived by the public as having the willingness, if you like, to see them through? I mean, my feeling is that while the Cabinet, by and large, kept saying, yes, the policy is in this direction, there were contradictory messages that kept coming, both from caucus and others, about Labor's determination to see it through.
But don't you see the seeds of dissent of the sort that your government endured, with Winston Peters and Jim Bolger sitting in the same caucus room?
Oh, no doubt about that. I mean, this is the largest caucus in New Zealand history by a long way, and I suspect that we've got a situation where the Prime Minister of the day doesn't even know many of the people who are currently in his caucus, a bit like the situation in 1935. And you've got all sorts of potential for divisions.
Richard Harman, was Mike Moore the man for the job?
I didn't think so when he got the job, because I think we all thought it was just yet another symbol of Labor falling apart. That why go on changing leaders when the problem was much more fundamental than that? But you've got to admire the way he campaigned. And I think what has been very interesting about the way he's campaigned is the way he's been seeking to define a new Labor constituency, if you like. When he talks about our people, he actually goes on and defines them. And our people are people who marched against the Springbok tour, who don't actually agree with a great deal of what Dr Bassett's talking about. They're not the kind of people who agree wholeheartedly with Roger Douglas. They're they're the victims in society often. Often they're the people who are not as well off.
They do want a coherence of policy, however. The stability factor. People want to be able to wake up in the morning and to know that the government is at the same position that it was at when they went to bed last night.
I agree with that.
If you read Australian politics, that's been the great thing that Hawke has given to Australia. An absolute predictability. What happened was that the predictability of the Labor government was actually destroyed in the early part of 1988, and it was a superhuman task to try to recreate it.
Is the people you're talking about, Richard Harman, what Mike Moore talks about as the family?
Yes, yes, the tribe, the family, our folk, or whatever you want to call them.
How are they responding to that?
They seem to quite like it. I think what's really been interesting about this campaign is if for example, you go to a factory cafeteria where presumably one finds our folk, is the interest and the intelligence with which they analyse the election. And we don't hear any great sort of dramatic statements about how dare you have an inflation target of 0 to 2%. That is destroying the country's ideological base or anything like that. What people have been saying is, what does that mean? Can you carry it out? How will it apply to my industry? There's an enormous interest, I think, in the country at the moment in politics and in economics. But I agree with Dr Bassett. People do want a predictability. But the tribe that Mike Moore's appealing to want a little bit more than that as well. They want someone, they want something spiritual almost in politics.
Isn't that just the human face on a predictable government? I mean, they're wanting the government to be predictable, all right, but they want it to be a more human government, and they want it to actually enter the workplace, and they want it to involve them in discussion and to leave them with the feeling that they've had their input. And I think my criticism of the government, and I have to accept my own share of it, is that we did not involve people to the extent we should have all the way through the big change.
Yeah, because a lot of people, for example, have complained about, I mean, one of the issues I'm sure that cost Labor votes was in fact your local government reform, which left people out, which people didn't understand properly. We heard that on the campaign consistently. Wasn't there a danger that Labor was just too predictable, it just steamrolled on, that once it had gotten a policy, it just went on and implemented that policy regardless?
Well, there wasn't much doubt in 1987 that we were going to reform local government, and they voted for it. But, and I'd have to say that in the lists of concerns that the pollsters kept turning up, local government reform scarcely rated a mention. It was really the economy and the government and its predictable handling of the issue, or its unpredictable handling, that was the thing that really worried people.
Dr. Bassett, how do you put the wheels back on the party? How do you get morale back, money back, workers back?
A lot of opportunities there for this party in the sense that while the numbers are small, the smallest caucus since 1931 for the Labor Party, there still are a lot of opportunities for them in the sense that they've got some very vigorous and experienced members to make up a front bench. But be that as it may, I think that the party itself, and by that I mean the New Zealand executive, are going to have to really look at the Constitution carefully. It's about as democratic as the Constitution of South Africa, and they're going to have to also see that the candidate selection process is looked to with much more involvement from the party constituencies.
How are party finances an organisation?
Well, I haven't been close enough to it to know, but all I know is that in most of the Auckland electorates they've basically paid for things. They'll probably have a few debts, but so we do after every election campaign.
Richard Hammond, what's your estimation of the party organisation as it begins to look at 1993?
Well, it's almost non-existent. I mean, that was one of the reasons that they didn't do very well on Saturday.
And do you think they can put it together again for 1993?
That depends on what National does. The National's going to give them some chances. If National introduces its industrial relations reforms, that should persuade the unions to be a bit more helpful to Labor. If Ruth Richardson and Jenny Shipley implement some of the reforms they're planning, that should leave a few alienated people for Labor to pick up. And that's where Labor has its roots, and that's from where Labor will have to grow.
Where's the Bolger government vulnerable?
Oh, I would say that it is vulnerable because we're in the period of big swings in politics. Since 1972, we've been getting increasingly vigorous swings backwards and forwards. And you're in a situation now where the new government has about 15 seats, which a zephyr of wind could blow away. And I suspect that that will be where the government is most vulnerable. The economy is obviously not going to become really buoyant for some years now, and I suspect by 1993 the Just Jim party will scarcely exist, and you know, there really is an opportunity for Labor.
Richard Harmon, where's Jim Bolger vulnerable?
In the areas I mentioned earlier, if they're going to do the things they say they're going to do, then people are going to be excluded, not included, and that's going to cause his first problem. Secondly, if he doesn't deliver on economic growth, he's going to be in big trouble.
Is he going to be able to handle those young Turks, the Michael Laws, the Win Peters and the caucus?
The most crucial test for Jim Bolger is what he does with Win Peters. Is Win Peters going to be in Cabinet or outside Cabinet?
What's your guess?
In, I think.
In what capacity?
Well, the logic, I can't see how in 1990 you can have a Pākehā Minister of Maori Affairs.
Unless it's the Prime Minister.
Unless it's the Prime Minister.
Thank you very much. Dr. Bassett, thank you very much. And that's it for election coverage for another 3 years. And that's it for Frontline tonight.
In 1984, the Te Māori exhibition was opened in New York. This item was broadcast on the Koha series on 18 November that year.
98.7 Kiss FM, 54 right now.
Breezy and warm today, a high going up to 80. Clear skies.
The Metropolitan Museum is indeed honored to present to the public these marvelous works representing the rich artistic heritage of the Maori people. In the long and proud tradition of the Metropolitan, we have established the ability to bring the great treasures of the world to an international public. This marks a significant and rare moment.
Tēnei te mihi nei ki ngā manatunga o mātou wheinga he tau roto i te whare nei. Tēnā koutou, ko ta tū mai nei mātou, ki te whakaahuru i a koutou, e noho nei te whenua o tau. Ia hatia, noho mai koutou, ngā manatunga o te iwi, noho mai runga i te rangi Māori.
We are indeed very happy and pleased to share with you, and not only with you, with the wider community, the treasures of our people. We now have come of age, and it is a very historic and momentous occasion for us and for you. We join with you, and we want to share with you our heritage. It's taken a long time, and we share with you and with the world.
Welcome to this opening of Te Māori. This exhibition gives the people of this great nation their first real opportunity to view New Zealand and its society through its indigenous people, the Māori. If you can appreciate that it has taken 7 years' work to get the exhibition to these shores, you will understand the deep and complex spiritual issues involved and the intrinsic values which these exhibits have. For these items are not just historic relics. They are not just works of art. For my people, they are literally town treasures. They are living items full of Māori, the life principle, the spirit of the talisman, the manifestation of the past, and the pathway into the future.
Kei tō mātou arike. Ako a koe, kei tā wāhi o ngā mōna nei ko mātou kei ko nei. Koe anō ngā manaakitanga ki runga i a koe. Tō tātou mātou nei tina. Tēnei mātou o mōkai. Ko tāu mai, te wāhi tuku o mai ai ngā taonga i whakarere nei hoi o koutou tūpuna o koutou mātua. Ai te rangi nei, te wāte nei a kōrero te ai. Nātou te ngā ohaki. Ko tāu mai kei roto kei te whare ki te ai, e te kanohi tangata e ngā iwi o te ao. Nei o reira kei te ariki, noho mai rai raro i ngā manaakitanga atu matu.
for me to say goodbye. Soon we'll be sailing or flying. Far across the sea. And think of it sometime. While we're away. Come on, let's sing. Kindly remember me. And when you return, you'll find me waiting here. Come on, sing.
That item was broadcast on the Koha series on 18 November 1984.
We conclude this hour with a feature from the Spotlight on Parliament series, which can be found on the New Zealand Parliament website.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko kura moia hua hau, ko te tumu whakarai o te whareparemata o Aotearoa. Ko tāku mahi e puta atura tō tātou reo rangatira, kei roto i ngā pōhiri, ngā mihi whakatau, me ngā hui i roto i tēnei kātū whare. Hoi anō, ko te reo Māori, hei whakapakari atura taku wairua, whakapakari atura taku hiningaro, whakapakari atura ki te kōrero atu ki ngā iwi katoa e uru tomo mai rā ki roto i tō tātou whare, te whare paremata o Aotearoa.
For some contemporary insights into the workings of Parliament, you can view a collection of short videos from the Spotlight on Parliament series. Just head to the New Zealand Parliament website at www.parliament.nz.